Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Ray, honey, can you grab me that blue thread? His mother's voice called from across the room. Without looking up, Ray reached out and plucked a spool of cerulean thread from the nearby table, tossing it over his shoulder with practiced ease. His mother caught it deftly, a small smile playing on her lips. What would I do without you? She mused, returning to her work. Ray glanced up, a matching grin on his face. Probably hire actual help instead of relying on your son's unpaid labor? His mother laughed, the sound bright and warm in the cluttered space. And miss out on all this quality time? Never. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the hum of machines and rustle of fabric creating a soothing symphony. Ray had grown up in this workshop, watching his mother's small fashion design business blossom from a hobby into a respected boutique label. He'd learned to sew before he could ride a bike, and while he'd never planned on following in her footsteps, he found a certain peace in helping out when he could. The tranquil atmosphere was shattered by the shrill ring of his mother's phone. Ray watched as she answered, her expression morphing from pleasant to panicked in a matter of seconds. "What do you mean you can't make it?" she exclaimed, pacing back and forth. "The show is in 2 days." Ray set aside his work, concern etching itself across his features. As his mother continued her heated conversation, he pieced together the situation. Apparently, her lead model had canceled at the last minute, leaving her without a showcase for her latest collection. When she finally hung up, Ray's mother looked deflated. She sank into a nearby chair, head in her hands. "This is a disaster," she muttered. "I can't reschedule the show, but without a model." Ray's mind raced. He knew how much this showcase meant to his mother. It was her chance to break into a higher echelon of the fashion world, to get her designs in front of influential buyers and critics. Without thinking, he blurted out, "I'll do it!" His mother looked up, confusion written across her face. "What?" "I'll be your model," Ray said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I know the collection inside and out. I helped you make half of it. Who better to showcase your designs?" For a moment, his mother just stared at him. Then she burst out laughing. "Oh, honey, that's sweet of you to offer, but, well, the collection is for women." Ray felt his cheeks flush, but he pressed on. "So, with the right makeup and styling, I could pass. I'm tall and lean, just like your usual models. And think about it. Having a male model showcase women's fashion could be a real statement. It might even get you more attention." His mother's laughter faded, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Ray nodded, his heart pounding. He wasn't entirely sure why he'd made the offer, but now that he had, he was determined to see it through. "Let me help, Mom. We can at least try, right?" After a long moment, his mother nodded slowly. "All right," she said, a spark of excitement returning to her eyes. "Let's give it a shot." The next day found Ray seated in front of a large, illuminated mirror, surrounded by an array of unfamiliar tools and products. His mother had called in favors from her network of stylists and makeup artists, explaining the situation and swearing them to secrecy. "Honey, are you sure about this?" His mother hovered nearby, concern etched on her face. "It's not too late to back out." Ray met her eyes in the mirror and managed a small smile. "I'm sure, Mom. Let's do this." The transformation began with a close shave, ridding Ray of any trace of stubble. Then came the makeup. He watched, fascinated as the artist worked her magic. Foundation smoothed out his skin tone, contouring accentuated his cheekbones, and subtle shading reshaped his features. By the time she moved on to his eyes, Ray barely recognized himself. "Close your eyes, sweetie," the makeup artist instructed, wielding an eyelash curler. Ray complied, trying not to flinch as she worked. False lashes were applied with expert precision, and when he finally opened his eyes, they seemed impossibly large and feminine. Next came the hairstylist. Ray's dark brown locks were already on the longer side, falling just past his ears. The stylist worked quickly, applying extensions and styling the result into loose, flowing waves that framed his face. As the finishing touches were applied, a swipe of rose-colored lipstick, a dusting of shimmer on his collarbones, Ray stared at his reflection in awe. The person looking back at him was undeniably feminine, with soft features and an almost ethereal quality. "Oh my God," his mother breathed, coming to stand behind him. "Ray, you look incredible." Ray stood, turning to face her. He felt oddly vulnerable, exposed in a way he'd never experienced before. "Do you think it'll work?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's perfect. You're perfect." The stylist cleared her throat, breaking the emotional moment. "We should get him into the first outfit," she suggested. "The pre-party event starts in an hour." Ray's eyes widened. "Pre-party event? What pre-party event?" His mother winced. "I forgot to mention that, didn't I? It's a small gathering before the main show. Just a few key industry people, some celebrities. Nothing to worry about." Ray felt his newfound confidence wavering. It was one thing to walk down a runway, but mingling with people, carrying on conversations? How was he supposed to pull that off? Sensing his panic, his mother squeezed his arm. "You'll be fine, honey. Just smile, be polite, and if anyone asks too many questions, just excuse yourself to powder your nose." Before Ray could protest further, he was ushered behind a screen to change. The first outfit was a flowing summer dress in shades of coral and gold. The fabric whispered against his skin as he slipped it on, the stylist helping him with the zipper and adjusting the fit. When he emerged, his mother gasped. "Oh, Ray," she murmured, "you look absolutely stunning." Ray turned to the full-length mirror, hardly believing his eyes. The dress hugged his body in all the right places. With the makeup, hair, and outfit combined, he looked every inch the fashion model. "Ready for the finishing touch?" the stylist asked, holding up a pair of strappy gold heels. Ray eyed them warily. "I don't know if I can walk in those." "You'll be fine," his mother assured him. "We'll practice a bit before we leave." The next half hour was spent with Ray, teetering around the workshop, gradually growing more comfortable in the heels. By the time they were ready to leave, he could walk with something approaching grace. As they stood at the door, preparing to depart, Ray's mother turned to him. "Are you absolutely sure about this, honey? It's not too late to back out." Ray took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I'm sure, Mom. Let's go knock 'em dead." The pre-party was held in a swanky downtown loft, all exposed brick and gleaming hardwood floors. As Ray entered on his mother's arm, he felt every eye in the room turn towards them. He fought the urge to shrink back, instead lifting his chin and affecting the aloof expression he'd seen on so many models. "Elena!" a voice called out. Ray's mother turned, a bright smile spreading across her face as she greeted an older woman in an impeccably tailored suit. "Margot, darling, how are you?" She air-kissed the woman's cheeks. "Have you met my new muse? This is Ray." Ray started at the feminized version of his name, but quickly recovered, offering a shy smile and a murmured hello. Margot's eyes raked over him appraisingly. "My dear, she's exquisite. Where on earth did you find her?" "Oh, you know," Ray's mother said airily. "Sometimes talent just falls into your lap. Ray, why don't you mingle a bit while I catch up with Margot?" Before Ray could protest, his mother had steered him towards the bar and disappeared into the crowd. He stood there for a moment, feeling lost and more than a little overwhelmed. "First time?" a voice asked from beside him. Ray turned to find a strikingly beautiful woman smiling at him. She was tall and willowy, with sharp cheekbones and piercing green eyes. Ray recognized her as Adriana, a famous model who'd graced countless magazine covers. "Is it that obvious?" he asked, trying to pitch his voice a bit higher than usual. Adriana laughed, a warm, rich sound. "Only to those of us who've been there. Don't worry, you're doing fine. Just remember to breathe." Ray felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "Thanks," he said, meaning it. "I'm Ray." "Adriana," she replied, though of course Ray already knew that. "So how did you end up as Elena's new muse? Last I heard, she was working with Chloe." Ray's mind raced, trying to come up with a plausible story. "Oh, you know how it is," he said vaguely. "Right place, right time. Elena saw something in me, I guess." Adriana nodded sagely. "She has a good eye. That dress is stunning on you." "Thanks," Ray said, smoothing his hands over the fabric. "I feel like a different person in it." "That's the magic of fashion," Adriana said with a wink. "It can transform us, let us be whoever we want to be." As they chatted, Ray found himself relaxing. Adriana introduced him to other models and designers, and he slowly grew more comfortable in his role. He even managed to field a few questions about Elena's collection, drawing on his intimate knowledge of the designs to speak passionately about the inspiration behind them. As the evening wore on, Ray found himself actually enjoying the experience. There was something liberating about being Ray, about slipping into this alternate persona. He felt graceful, confident, beautiful in a way he'd never experienced before. Eventually, his mother found him again, her eyes shining with pride. "You're doing wonderfully, darling," she murmured, squeezing his arm. "Everyone's talking about you." Ray felt a flutter of excitement in his chest. "Really?" His mother nodded. "Margot's already asking about booking you for her next campaign. And I overheard Vogue's fashion editor saying she can't wait to see more of you on the runway." The reality of the situation suddenly hit Ray like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a one-time thing to help out his mother. He'd created a persona, a whole new identity, and people were buying into it. What would happen after the show? How long could he keep up this charade? As if sensing his inner turmoil, his mother leaned in close. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. "Together. For now, just enjoy the moment." Ray took a deep breath, pushing his worries aside. His mother was right. Whatever came next, they'd handle it as a team. For now, he had a job to do. "All right," he said, straightening his shoulders and affecting a model's pout. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget." The next morning dawned bright and early, sunlight streaming through the workshop windows as Ray and his mother made final preparations for the showcase. The atmosphere was electric with nervous energy and excitement. "How are you feeling, honey?" his mother asked, adjusting the hem of a flowing emerald gown. Ray looked up from where he was carefully arranging a row of stilettos. "Nervous," he admitted. "But ready, I think." His mother crossed the room and pulled him into a tight hug. "You've already done so much more than I ever could have asked for," she murmured. "No matter what happens today, I want you to know how proud I am of you." Ray felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered, hugging her back. The tender moment was interrupted by the arrival of the hair and makeup team. Ray was whisked away to be transformed once again into Ray, the mysterious new face of his mother's fashion line. As the artists worked their magic, Ray closed his eyes and tried to center himself. He thought about all the times he'd watched his mother struggle to make ends meet, all the late nights she'd spent hunched over her sewing machine, chasing her dreams. This was his chance to give something back, to help push her career to the next level. When he opened his eyes, Ray stared back at him from the mirror. Today, her makeup was bolder, with smoky eyes and deep red lips. Her hair was pulled back into an elegant updo, a few artfully placed tendrils framing her face. "You look stunning," the makeup artist declared, stepping back to admire her work. Ray managed a smile, his heart pounding. "Thank you," he said softly. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Ray was helped into the first outfit, a sleek, form-fitting cocktail dress in deep burgundy. He practiced his walk one last time, trying to channel the confidence and grace he'd seen in professional models. Before he knew it, it was time. Ray stood backstage, peering out at the crowd gathering in the venue. He spotted several familiar faces from the pre-party, including Adriana, who caught his eye and gave him an encouraging wink. "Ready?" his mother asked, appearing at his side. Ray took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "Ready." The music started, a pulsing beat that seemed to sync with Ray's racing heart. He heard the announcer introduce his mother's collection, and then it was time. Ray stepped out onto the runway, the bright lights momentarily blinding him. For a heartbeat, he froze, overwhelmed by the sea of faces staring up at him. Then muscle memory kicked in, and he began to walk. One foot in front of the other, hips swaying slightly, shoulders back, chin up. Ray focused on his breathing, on the feel of the fabric against his skin, on the steady click of his heels against the polished floor. As he reached the end of the runway, he paused, striking a pose he'd practiced countless times. The camera flashes were blinding, but Ray held his position, counting to 3 before turning and making his way back. The rest of the show passed in a whirlwind of quick changes and runway walks. Ray showcased a variety of looks, from casual day wear to elegant evening gowns. With each appearance, he felt his confidence grow. By the final walk, when he stepped out in the showstopper, a breathtaking silver gown that seemed to float around him, he felt truly transformed. As he made his final turn, Ray caught sight of his mother standing in the wings. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears, her hands clasped over her heart. In that moment, Ray knew that every uncomfortable moment, every twinge of doubt, had been worth it. The show ended to thunderous applause. Ray joined the other models for a final walk, his mother taking center stage to accept the accolades. As they left the runway, Ray was immediately surrounded by a flurry of activity. "Darling, you were magnificent!" Margot gushed. "We simply must talk about a contract." Before Ray could respond, he was whisked away by a group of journalists, all clamoring for a quote from Elena's mysterious new muse. He fielded their questions as best he could, drawing on everything he'd learned about the fashion industry over the years. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ray managed to escape to a quiet corner backstage. He slumped against the wall, exhaustion suddenly hitting him like a wave. "You did it," his mother's voice said softly. Ray looked up to see her standing there, a proud smile on her face. "We did it," he corrected her. She crossed the room and pulled him into a tight hug. "I don't know how I can ever thank you for this," she murmured. Ray hugged her back, feeling a mix of emotions wash over him. Pride, relief, excitement, and a touch of fear. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. His mother pulled back, studying his face. "That's up to you, honey. We can tell everyone the truth or, Ray prompted when she trailed off. She hesitated for a moment. "Or we can see where this takes us." Ray seems to have made quite an impression. There could be real opportunities here. Ray felt a flutter of excitement in his chest, quickly followed by a wave of anxiety. But how long could we keep it up? Someone's bound to figure it out eventually. His mother shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe not. The fashion world loves a good mystery, and who knows? Maybe by the time anyone does figure it out, you'll have made enough of a name for yourself that it won't matter." Ray considered this. Part of him wanted to end the charade now, to go back to his normal life. But another part was exhilarated by the possibilities. He thought about how it had felt on the runway, all eyes on him, embodying his mother's artistic vision. "I need some time to think about it," he said finally. His mother nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course, there's no rush to decide. For now, let's just enjoy the moment. We did something amazing today." Ray smiled, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. "Yeah, we did." As they made their way back to the main area, Ray was once again swept up in a whirlwind of congratulations and questions. But this time, he faced it all with a newfound confidence. Whatever the future held, he knew he could handle it. The night wore on, a blur of champagne toasts and excited chatter. Ray found himself swept up in conversations with designers, buyers, and fellow models, all eager to know more about Elena's captivating new muse. As the crowd began to thin, Ray found a quiet moment to slip away. He made his way to a small balcony overlooking the city, grateful for a breath of fresh air. The cool night breeze was a welcome relief after the stuffy heat of the crowded venue. "There you are," a familiar voice said behind him. Ray turned to see Adriana stepping out onto the balcony, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. She offered one to him with a smile. "Thanks," Ray said, accepting the glass gratefully. "I just needed a moment to clear my head." Adriana nodded knowingly. "First shows can be overwhelming. You handled it beautifully, though." Ray felt a flush of pride at her words. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, sipping their champagne and gazing out at the twinkling city lights. Finally, Adriana spoke again. "You know, there's something different about you," she said thoughtfully. "I can't quite put my finger on it, but you have a presence, a uniqueness. It's refreshing." Ray felt his heart skip a beat. Did she suspect? But Adriana's expression remained open and friendly, with no hint of suspicion. "I guess I'm just being myself," Ray said carefully. Adriana smiled. "That's the best thing you can do in this industry. Too many people try to fit a mold, but the ones who really make it, they're the ones who stay true to themselves." Ray nodded, feeling a strange mix of guilt and validation. Was he being true to himself? Or was this all just an elaborate deception? As if sensing his inner turmoil, Adriana placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Whatever you're wrestling with," she said softly, "just remember that you have a gift. Don't let anyone take that away from you, not even yourself." With that, she gave his arm a gentle squeeze and made her way back inside, leaving Ray alone with his thoughts. He turned back to the city skyline, his mind racing. Adriana's words echoed in his head, mingling with his mother's earlier suggestion. Could he really do this? Could he become Ray not just for a night, but for a career? The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. He thought about how it had felt on the runway, the rush of embodying his mother's designs. He thought about the doors this could open, not just for him, but for his mother's business. But he also thought about the complications, the constant fear of discovery, the strain of living a double life, the potential fallout if the truth ever came to light. As the night wore on and the party finally wound down, Ray found himself no closer to a decision. He helped his mother pack up the last of her designs, his mind still swirling with possibilities and doubts. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," his mother said gently as they loaded the last box into her van. "Take some time. Think it through." Ray nodded, grateful for her understanding. "I will," he promised. As they drove home through the quiet, pre-dawn streets, Ray gazed out the window, lost in thought. The city seemed different somehow, full of new possibilities and potential paths. Whatever he decided, he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be quite the same again. The events of the past few days had opened his eyes to a world he'd never truly considered before, had awakened something within him that he hadn't known existed. As the first rays of sunlight began to paint the sky, Ray felt a sense of peace settle over him. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he had time, and he had his mother's support no matter what he chose. For now, that was enough. The future, with all its uncertainty and promise, could wait until after a good night's sleep. Ray woke late the next afternoon, the events of the previous night feeling almost like a dream. But as he stumbled into the kitchen, he was greeted by the sight of his mother surrounded by fashion magazines, all featuring photos from the show. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said with a smile. "Or should I say good afternoon?" Ray mumbled a greeting, making a beeline for the coffee pot. As he poured himself a cup, his eyes landed on one of the magazine covers. There he was, or rather there Ray was, striking a pose in the silver showstopper gown. The headline read, "Fashion's New It Girl. Meet Ray, Elena's mysterious muse." They can't stop talking about you, his mother said, a hint of pride in her voice. I've already had calls from 3 major designers wanting to book you for their next shows. Ray sank into a chair, his mind reeling. Mom, he said slowly, what are we going to do? His mother's expression softened. She reached across the table and took his hand. That's up to you, honey. If you want to end it here, we can. I'll tell everyone it was a one-time thing, that you're pursuing other opportunities. No one needs to know the truth. Ray nodded, considering this. It would be the easiest option, certainly. He could go back to his normal life, file this experience away as a crazy adventure. But, and if I don't want to end it? He asked quietly. His mother squeezed his hand. Then we figure it out, together. It won't be easy, but if this is something you want to pursue, I'll support you every step of the way. Ray took a deep breath, his mind racing. He thought about how it had felt on the runway, the rush of confidence and creativity. He thought about Adriana's words, about staying true to oneself. And he thought about his mother, about all the doors this could open for her business. I think, he said slowly, I want to give it a try. Not forever, maybe, but I'm not ready for it to be over yet. His mother's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and concern. Are you sure, honey? It's a big decision. Ray nodded, feeling more certain with each passing moment. I'm sure. I don't know exactly how we'll make it work, but I want to try. His mother stood and came around the table, pulling him into a tight hug. Oh, Ray, she murmured, you continually amaze me. We'll figure it out together, I promise. As they embraced, Ray felt a sense of excitement building within him. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and potential pitfalls. But he also knew that with his mother by his side, he could face anything. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Ray and his mother worked tirelessly to create a backstory for Ray, filling in the details of her life and background. They decided to present her as a small-town girl who'd been discovered by Elena, explaining away her sudden appearance on the fashion scene. Ray threw himself into learning everything he could about the fashion world, studying magazines and videos to perfect his walk and poses. His mother hired a voice coach to help him maintain a convincingly feminine voice, and he spent hours practicing in front of the mirror. There were close calls and moments of panic, like when a childhood friend spotted him at a coffee shop and nearly blew his cover, or the time he almost forgot to shave before a photo shoot, necessitating a frantic last-minute touch-up. But there were triumphs, too. His first solo photo shoot, where he managed to channel Ray so convincingly that even the photographer was fooled. The day a major fashion house called to book him for their upcoming show. The moment he saw his face, Ray's face, on a billboard in Times Square. Through it all, Ray found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. He developed a new appreciation for the artistry of fashion and makeup. He gained confidence in his body and movements, and he discovered a talent for performance that he never knew he possessed. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.